Welcome to Born on the Bayou Sports, a Houston sports show made for Houstonians by Houstonians. Join Tim Costello and Scott Barzilla every week as they break down the latest in Houston Astros, Rockets, and Texans news. Tim's a former minor league broadcaster, and Scott has written 2 books on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, if Javier could get it figured out, it would make things a lot easier because he was that guy everybody was counting on this year to be a Cy Young candidate, take that big step forward and help anchor this rotation with Fromber.
Since he's come to Houston, you can look at the development of guys like Carlos Correa defensively, Jeremy Pena defensively. I mean, you can Alex Bregman's, certainly I think a better than average third baseman.
And now you're putting teams in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. Now here comes Will Anderson. Pin back your ears, let's go. So if you're Bayou born and bred, or just like spending time in the H, sit down, relax, and stay Houston strong. Hey, welcome back in Born on the Bayou Sports. Tim Costello, Scott Barzilla, coming to you on what's just been another, Scott, we'll call it a typical Houston sports week. Bad news seems to follow each other.
It does. However, we did get a piece of good news, which we will get to later on in the show. But leading off, obviously the most pressing bit of news in today's sports world, particularly in Houston, was the Hall of Fame vote. So it looks like we have 4 new members of the Hall of Fame. We've got Joe Mauer, we've got Adrian Beltre, we've got Todd Helton, and it looks like Jim Leland is finally getting the call, although I thought he was already in the Hall of Fame, but it kind of shows you what I know. Obviously, one big name in Houston missing from that list. So I know you want to, open this up. So what are your thoughts on Billy Wagner missing out again on the Hall of Fame?
It's unbelievably frustrating because if you go by the numbers, he's the 2nd or 3rd best closer of all time. If you go by anyone in that era, who was the least, who did you want to face the least in the 9th inning besides Mariano Rivera? I'd say most people said him over even Trevor Hoffman. I mean, the guy was throwing straight gas, had a slider that was filthy. He's top 3 all time in every single major category for a closer that you could imagine. Sub 3 ERA. At the end of the day, what more do you want, Scott? He was a major part of multiple playoff teams. I don't know what more he could have done as far as his resume. We were told this was the year. They made a video in perfect Houston fashion. Craig Biggio, narrates a video wishing his friend good luck. When he had, so many 250 ballots in, he was at like 79%. And then to come two votes short, I was telling my wife earlier, this is a continued pattern of ignoring of Houston athletes, right? Because let's use Adrian Beltre as a perfect example. 3,000 hits, and you know what? The guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer, as he should be. He had 3,000 hits. Who didn't get in on their first ballot when they had 3,000 hits, Scott? Craig Biggio didn't get on the second either. I mean, come on. The guy had 3,000 fucking hits, and he made him wait? There's things that just don't make sense to me as a Houston sports fan. And it's things like this, right? Where guys are to me, surefire Hall of Famers. When you look back at the game in the 90s and early 2000s, there was 2 or 3 closers that stood out above everybody else. Those were the Hall of Fame guys. That's what a Hall of Fame player is. It's the ones that are just above everybody else. So I don't know what more you need to do other than be the best there is at your position for a 10 to 12 year stretch. To me, that's what a Hall of Famer is, and that's what Billy Wagner did.
So let me go 3 things there. Number 1, there really should be no difference between first, second, or third ballot. I mean, that's just something that's made up. Joe DiMaggio was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. So, if you want to go away from, from Houston centric here, you mentioned being the best of your position for 10 or 12 years. Jeff Bagwell was the best first baseman in baseball. during that whole period. He did not get in on the first ballot. So I think you mentioned the Houston-centric thing. The only thing I can think of is that Houston team never won. They never won a championship. They always seem to fall short in the playoffs. Part of that is that the Braves were just simply better in most years. But the other part of that too was, like in 1998, chronically underachieved against the Padres. And then, obviously in the early 2000s, before we get Phil Garner on the scene, they just couldn't quite get over the hump. And so, and Wagner was gone by the time that they did go to the World Series. But the last thing I'll point out is that the Hall of Fame index really doesn't deal with relief pitchers. And so, my if we consider them as pitchers, Mariano Rivera and Dennis Eckersley are the only two that belong in the Hall of Fame. If you want to go straight index score for index score, and primarily because number one, Eckersley spent half his career as a starter, so he had starter numbers, but Rivera was just so far and above anybody else. So if you're going to consider relief pitchers as their own position, Wagner is a top 5 reliever of all time by any metrics that you want to throw out there. If you want to throw out there total saves, okay, total saves to me is kind of it's not pointless, but are we going to really compare Billy Wagner to Lee Smith, for instance?
Yeah.
But if you're going to look at, like ERA, if you're going to look at, strikeouts per 9 innings, if you're going to look at, say, save percentage, which would probably be more valuable, I don't know where you go where you sit there and say that Wagner is not one of the top at least 10 relief pitchers of all time, and we already have upwards of 10 relief pitchers in. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you there.
It's it's boggling to me. It's if you were a major league GM today and you had a prime Billy Wagner, everybody'd want him, right? Like you see the way people are slobbering over Jonathan Papelbon, or I'm sorry, no, Craig Kimbrell is who I mean, right? Like I meant Craig Kimbrell. People still continue to give Craig Kimbrell jobs today. So Billy Wagner was the prototype of what a closer is a hard thrower with a big wipeout slider. Didn't walk a lot of guys. Got a lot of weak contact, if any contact, high strikeouts. That's what you want in a closer. That's what every major league team would want today. So, if you are the prototype for what the position has become, how are you not in the Hall of Fame? Because at some point we acknowledge that DH is a position, and we're going to start putting some DHs in as Poppy and Edgar Martinez and Frank Thomas and guys like that are Hall of Famers. We acknowledge DH is a position that people legitimately prepare for and play. So what closer is a position that these guys have to be ready to go at the biggest point of the game, and they have to come in and they have to get 3 outs. And there are certain guys who are the prototype for the way the position has evolved. And if you're that one of those guys and you're not in the Hall of Fame, that's silly. It's absolutely silly.
Skipping ahead, we're going to get to this obviously down the road, but there's going to be an obvious comparison to the guy we just signed, Josh Hader. Josh Hader's left-handed, Billy Wagner's left-handed. Josh Hader is, depending on how you want to apportion the money, the highest paid closer in baseball. Edwin Diaz officially has more money on his deal, but some of it's deferred. So, okay, whatever, right? So right now, if we consider Josh Hader is in the prime of his career, would you rather have Billy Wagner in his prime or Josh Hader in his prime?
I still say Billy just because I know what Billy's prime was, and I know realistically he was so good. But I mean, so was Hader. Last year was a 1.28 ERA, 33 saves, 56 innings pitched, 85 strikeouts. And you look at some of Billy Wagner's best years, he's right there with them. He got a 1.57 in '99. He had a 1.78 in 2003, a 1.51 in 2005. Billy Wagner I don't know. I think I'm excited as I can be for Hader, but maybe it's because I know how fun it is to have a flame throwing lefty at the back end of your bullpen, and I'm happy to have it back.
Well, we'll talk more about Hater later, but I want to tell you two things about Wagner, and you brought up one of them. Number one, he doesn't walk a lot of guys, or didn't walk a lot of guys. Hader's walk rate is, I don't know, it's extremely high. I mean, he's not Brian Abreu, but yeah, he walks some guys. But you mentioned those ERA numbers. Those ERA numbers happened in the height of the steroid era. I mean, you weren't putting up sub 2 ERAs in the late 90s, early odds, unless you were Pedro Martinez, Mariano Rivera, or Billy Wagner. I mean, nobody was doing that. I don't think the hitting in 2023 is nearly on the level that it was in the early 2000s or late 90s.
I don't know. Yeah, you're probably right on the home run level, right? I think the home runs are definitely juiced
Well,
up there.
if you
And
just
what's
look at
funny is we've
runs,
got probably better quality hitters now.
but just look at run
Overall,
scoring. Just look at run scoring. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not even going to talk about, because you could argue we have better hitters now, but you could also argue we have better pitchers now. You could make that argument. What I'm looking at is simply run scoring totals. Teams were scoring more runs in those times. So to have a sub 2 ERA is saying
No,
something
you're
back
right.
then.
Absolutely, and you're right. It's no, couldn't agree with you more. You're right. It was more runs at that point, and I think what Wagner did at that time period is constantly overlooked when you talk about the greatest closer of all time. His name never comes up unless someone's an Astros fan, like, you should actually mention Billy Wagner, because everybody talks about Marvin Rivera, everybody talks about Hoffman, and those are the two. A little bit of Eck, but you don't really even hear that name as much. It's Mo and it's Hoffman, when in reality those three were mentioned in unison constantly in the 90s and the early 2000s. No one left Wagner out of that conversation. It's just now we seem to. And I want to say, too, I don't mean this in any way to belittle the guys who did get in today, because all three of those gentlemen are deserving Hall of Famers.
Yeah,
I think you and I went over in our other show who we thought
yeah,
should have been in the Hall of Fame, and I think every one of us
yeah,
had Beltre, had Helton, and had Joe Mauer on our list,
yeah.
and I have no argument with those. I don't understand some of the stinginess on votes, Scott. Like, I think Gary Sheffield's a Hall of Famer. I really do. The guy was an elite hitter by any stretch of what hitting is. I think Billy Wagner was a Hall of Famer. He was elite. And at some point, like, I understand this is the Hall of Fame, but some of these old guys gotta go, man. What it takes to be a voter needs to really be looked at, and your ballot needs to be scrutinized a little bit more, because if you're leaving Billy Wagner off your ballot, I have to know why. I want to know why.
Well, I think if you want to argue, and this is where, consistency is the important thing. If you want to argue that, hey, I don't consider relief pitchers to be a position, and so I'm just going to compare them with other pitchers. If you can show me your history and show me that you've never voted for a relief pitcher outside of, say, Mariano Rivera, because obviously everybody voted for him because he had 100%, then I'll sit there and say, okay, I'll listen to that. Doesn't necessarily mean I agree, just means I'll listen. But if you're going to sit there and say, I voted for Trevor Hoffman, but not Billy Wagner, I don't. The problem is the save was literally invented by a journalist in the late 60s. He invented the term. So what we have done is we have apportioned money, real dollars, and accolades and everything else based on a number which doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best at what you do. And you think about every other position on the diamond. Okay, Shohei Ohtani gets $700 million. Why? Because he's a great hitter and a great pitcher. Okay, all these other guys get amazing big time dollars because they have real stats to back up everything. We're giving, Josh Hader $19 million because he had 33 saves. Is he the best reliever in the game? Maybe, but he's not based on 33 saves. And so when you look at Wagner and say compare him to Trevor Hoffman, is Trevor Hoffman a better closer? Based on what? Based on the number of saves? Okay, that's nice. But I want a guy that's going to go into the ninth inning and lock that thing down. And more importantly, we'll get into this later, but I want somebody when the game is on the line who is going to lock that thing down. And it doesn't matter when that point is, whether it's the sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth inning. Okay.
In the history of
That's,
baseball, Scott, take Mariano Rivera out. Other than him, you need 3 outs to go win a championship. Who are you taking? Are you taking
I
Trevor
mean,
Hoffman?
no, God, no. I mean, he had a great changeup, but the guy, I don't know if he could break glass by the end of his career. And to me, if you're throwing junk up there, I'm sorry, you're not going to overpower people with junk.
No.
You might fool
Uh,
them. I mean, Doug Jones was a closer for, a few years. I don't know if you remember him.
Rod Beck had
Um,
some nice years too, but you know what? He's
Rod,
not in the Hall of Fame.
yeah,
But
but
I mean, there's not many people I'm taking over Billy Wagner
no,
to
no.
go get 3 outs to win a World Series. There's not many. He throws strikes. He hits in the inside part of the plate. He's gonna jam you at 99, and then he's gonna work a slider off your back foot if you're a righty, and you're done. That's the end of like you can't touch it. Maybe haters in that conversation with how he's pitched nowadays. But guys like Francisco Rodriguez get overplayed because they had some crazy, or Eric Gagne, or my wife's gonna be annoyed when I say this one, but Blackbeard Wilson. They had some nice years, but none of them were consistently at the top of their game for the stretch of time that Wagner was. And so I don't want to spend too much time just bitching and moaning that Billy Wagner didn't get in the Hall of Fame, but I really am disappointed in that.
I agree with you. I think, and I'm trying to stretch my brain to figure out who I would pick over Billy Wagner. There's guys that I would probably pick alongside Billy Wagner, saying like, I can't have Wagner, so I'll give you Goose Gossage. They're like, okay, I guess I could go along with that. Um, I'm not going Eck because we saw what happened to Eck in the 1988 World Series. Um, maybe like an old time guy like a Bruce Sutter, maybe. Uh, you know, maybe give me Dan Quisenberry at his best. But no, not over that sustained stretch, because that's the other thing with closers. A lot of those guys you mentioned are good for about 3, 4, 5 years, and then boom, they're done. Wagner, good for over a decade. So that's the best argument I can make.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, speaking of the heartbreak that we suffered, I mentioned it was a piling on. It started on Saturday, Scott. It started at 3 o'clock or 3:30 in the afternoon. The Cinderella season has finally come to an end here in Houston as the Houston Texans fall to the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional playoff round, not able to muster a single offensive touchdown in the game. I thought the defense played well up to a certain point, and then at some point they were just exhausted because the offense got literally nothing done, and the defense spent the whole damn game on the field. But overall, I think I want to try and focus less on that individual game and try and just focus more on what a great season that the team had, coming from a 3-14 campaign to I think it was 3-13-1 to where you are now. And many people feel an upcoming dynasty with a young quarterback, the best young quarterback in the league. Trying to stay positive, Scott. Long story short, but still a heartbreaking loss to the Ravens.
Yeah, two biggest stats I think on the year, and I just did an article on Battle Red blog about this. Basically looking at the stats comparing 2022 2023. Um, the big one is we went from 28 turnovers as a team to 14. And by the way, that's number one in the NFL, fewest turnovers in the league. So, and that's with a rookie quarterback. I can't imagine if you told me y'all are going to commit the fewest amount of turnovers. I would have thought, okay, we're handing the ball off 40 times and we're asking CJ Stroud to pass it 15 times and it's all dump outs to a back. That's what, that's the only way I could imagine getting to that total. But yet we opened up the offense and we threw the ball and we still committed fewer turnovers than any team in the league. You go from a -1 turnover ratio to +10. And that stat number is the number one predictor of who's going to be successful and who's not going to be successful when you look at team stats. And I think, for D'Amico Ryans, I tip my cap to him after the Cleveland Browns game. We went from, okay, I'm 50 years old. No team surrendered more rushing yards than the 2022 Texans in my lifetime. Now, granted, that's a 17-game schedule. There's some 14-game schedules in the beginning of my lifetime, but you can't find a historically worse rushing defense than that 2022 unit. We come back. We're in the top 10 in the league in total rushing yards allowed, top 5 in yards per attempt. How's that for a one-season turnaround?
It's fantastic because I think the biggest aspect of run defense is the culture and the attitude, right? When you have a mentality of we're going to stop the run, you're not going to run the ball on us, that permeates through the entire locker room. And it sets a tone on the defensive end that you're not gonna beat us in the trenches, and it permeates throughout the team. And I think D'Amico brought that. He brought that attitude of we're not gonna get beat up front. They're not gonna stuff the ball down our throats. And I think there were many times this season on 4th and 1 plays where if you tried to run the ball across it most likely didn't go well. The best 4th 1 plays were play action passes that went out the flat because we sold out so hard on the run. We almost lost the division on one of those if a young Colts running back had a better opportunity to catch the ball there. But at the end of the day, the attitude and the tenacity and the culture of this team that D'Amico Ryans brought is why we stopped the run. I feel like.
And the big part of that is you mentioned the words sold out. We definitely sold out on stopping the run. And so I think, there's a double-edged sword there. Number one, there was definitely a clear vision, which I don't think there ever really was a clear vision under Lovie Smith's defense. I think there was a bend, don't break. I think there was a, well, we're going to try to get them to turn the ball over. And, his defenses were generally pretty good at getting teams to turn the ball over. But D'Amico Ryans came in and said, we're stopping the run. Now, if you look at the season, if we start looking at things that need improvement, that meant that guys like Zach Wilson and Desmond Ritter absolutely torched this defense. And you're looking at those quarterbacks, you're going, what in the hell are they torching our defense? Well, the reason is because we're saying we're going to stop the run no matter what. And guys like Bijan Robinson, who might be the best young running back in this league, he didn't do much against this defense because they decided we're stopping you. Now, where that goes from here, and I think he's already alluded to it, that we're going to try to upgrade our defensive line talent. And I think, if you do that, you can stop the run without having to sell out to stop the run. And that makes your entire defense better. But that's a look to the future. I think a look to the now. He came in and said, we're stopping the run, and he accomplished it. And that's where you need to be, is that you need to be a team that sit there and said, this is what we're going to do. And by God, we're going to do it. And that's what they did.
Yeah, and it was a great season. We can take a quick look at the box score. CJ Stroud was 19 of 33, 175 yards. I thought they did a decent job on Lamar. He completed a lot of passes, 152 total yards of passing, but then he on the ground he burned you 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and it was a lot of it seemed like just didn't keep contained. It wasn't really the designed runs as much as it looked like you had him sacked. And then next thing you know, he's streaking down the sideline. And that's just what he does, right? Like, unless you've got an unbelievable game plan put together and you've got a linebacker that can spy that guy, or you've got two defensive ends that understand we've got to keep contained at all costs, he's going to do that. And he burned us, and it happens. And at the end of the day, Scott, the thing that stood out to me the most was this team just lacked weapons on offense. When you have the ability to take away Nico Collins because you have legitimate shut down corners or you can double team Nico Collins. There was nowhere for CJ Stroud to go with the football quickly, at least, right? CJ's pretty good when he can work his way through his progressions, find somebody, scramble out. But the way that defensive front was coming at him, and by the way, a guy that I mentioned in our old podcast as a potential defensive player of the year candidate, Jadeveon Clowney, he showed up to play. He was a menace on Saturday, and all that adds up to is there was nobody open, right? He didn't turn the ball over. I don't think CJ made bad decisions with
No.
the football. He just had nowhere to go. There was nobody on the outside who could beat their coverage and get open for CJ Stroud. We had no running game whatsoever, so there was no ability to hit a hard play action and beat somebody that way. And there at that point, you're just hoping that your man can beat the other man. And the only guy on the field who could do that for us is Nico Collins, and he was double and triple teamed all game. So then you're asking old ass Robert Woods to find a way to beat a man. You're asking Xavier Hutchinson to find a way to get open against all pro coverage that's out there, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I think at this point, it's just you look out there and there's a talent disparity on the field. Part of it's the injuries. Would have loved to have Tank Dell out there to stretch that field a little bit more. Would have loved to have Brown out there to stretch that field a little bit more. But at the end of the day, even with Tank Dell, I still think the Texans need another weapon. I think what that game showed me the most is you've got to have another wide receiver on top of Tank Dell. You've got to have three legitimate pass catchers because Dalton Schultz is not the guy. He doesn't block well enough to be an effective tight end, and he drops too many passes.
Yeah, I was going to say you hit the nail absolutely on the head. Good defensive coordinators, which D'Amico Ryans is one. The good defensive coordinators can take away your top threat. They absolutely can. And if you look at the Ravens, take away Lamar Jackson, who is obviously their top threat. Zay Flowers is their top receiving threat. Now, I don't have the box score in front of me. What did he have on the game?
I'm looking here. He got going a little bit later, but overall, Zay Flowers had 4 for 41.
That's not. If you hold a team's best receiving target to 441, I'll take that every day. I mean, you look around the league at the number of number one wide receivers, and you look at, like, say, obviously the Chiefs don't have a traditional number one wide receiver, but if you say, I'm going to hold Kelsey to 441, do you feel good about your chances of win?
No, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so,
And
uh,
no, he didn't have a touchdown either. The touchdown went to Likely,
right,
who had 2 catches for 34 yards, and Nelson Aguilar.
right. And so basically what you're looking at is you're looking at an offense that is diverse enough in Baltimore to where you can take away my number one threat, but I still have other ways to beat you. Now, the one thing I will add that I think if we were to return to Baltimore, I think Tank Dell definitely will help. And I think another wide receiver would definitely help. You got to have a consistent running game. Devin Singletary ripped off that one like 20, 25-yard run. That was it. That was your running game. I mean, there was one point in the first half where CJ Stroud was your leading rusher. And if CJ Stroud's your leading rusher, man, you're up shit creek.
Yeah, that's not what this
And
offense is built to do.
And so, and even, if you had targets, you could have set up a game plan saying, fuck the run, we're gonna air it out and throw 50 times. But to your point, Xavier Hutchinson has what, 2 catches for? Did he even have positive
Negative
yards?
3 yards.
Yeah.
-3 yards.
Um, John Mechie, goose eggs. Robert Woods, goose eggs.
1 for
Nico.
6.
Oh, I'm sorry, I shorted him. Jeez, I'm sorry, Mr. Woods.
Dare
Uh,
our third string running back / backup kicker, 1 for 13. Schultz had 5 for 43.
which is not
Singletary 5 for 48.
which from those two guys is not bad. If you want,
No,
to
right.
me, a tight end, if you give me 5 catches for 50 yards, I'll take that. But to your point, there is nobody on the other side of Nico Collins without Tank Dell. And so you got to go out there. I don't know if you do this in free agency. I don't know if you do this in the draft, but you got to go out and get a guy. Because to me, the odds of Tank Dell making it through 17 games healthy with his body, probably
Yeah, it's
not
gonna
all
be
that
tough.
good. Probably not all that good. I mean, I don't think he's going to be inside blocking like he was in the last time he broke his leg, but imagine him catching a pass over the middle and a safety just laying him out. I mean,
No,
you,
absolutely.
and
Th-
so to me, you're paying Woods $14 million to do what? To be a good leader. Okay, he is that. I'm sure he was a great leader in the locker room. I'm sure, like Kevin Walters, he's a hell of a blocker. But if I'm paying you $14 million, you better be more than a leader and a blocker. You got to bring me something. And if that means going out and getting, like I say, a Mike Evans on a short-term deal, I don't know that I want to pay Mike Evans 3 or 4 years at this stage of his career. But if you gave him like a 2-year deal, I could live with that. I mean, he just had a great game against the Lions. So I mean, I think he still has it. He's not a number one receiver anymore, but you don't need him to be. What were Nico's numbers
on the season,
on the game?
he had 80 or 60 something yards, I think it
Yeah,
was.
so
He had
he
5 for 68,
yeah, so he
leading receiver in
outperformed.
the whole game.
Yeah, he outperformed Flowers. So our number one receiver, their number one receiver, you cancel them out. Okay, that's fantastic. What else you got? Obviously, they have a quarterback who with a cheat code that can make things happen. When they had Christian Harris spying on them, they had some success because Christian Harris is a 4.40 guy. But when they tried Blake McCashman, spying on them or Perryman, that's just a recipe for disaster. That they can't keep up with that. So you probably need more speed at linebacker. That's probably another priority that you want to look at in the off season. But I don't think this was a defensive failure. I mean, I think you played them even for a half. Should have been up 13-10 if your Pro Bowl kicker, can make that kick. But when you can't keep your offense on the field, when you keep going three and out against this offense, there's just no way you can expect a defense to be out there 35, 40 minutes and keep up with that offense.
No, you're asking way too much. The effort was there, the intensity was there. You're just asking way too much of those guys, and I think you're right. You've got to go out and you've got to get a wide receiver. And I think it's going to have to be through the draft. I think you're going to have to try and find a way to get one of these big time first round talents because there's really not much out there in free agency. You've got Mike Evans, Odell Beckham, Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd, Kendrick Bourne. He's coming off an injury. McCall Hardman almost fumbled away the game on Sunday night for the Chiefs. Um, Nelson Aguilar, Josh Reynolds, Calvin
Yeah.
Ridley's a maybe for me. He's got some talent. Michael Pittman Jr. would be nice. I don't know if he's going to get away from Indianapolis, but he is a free agent. Other
I,
than that, man, I don't know. It's
well,
going to have to come from the draft. I feel like.
if you're going to run the ball better, you got to fix the interior of this offensive line as well. And so the problem that you're going to get to in the draft and the problems you look at in free agency is where do you spend your money and where do you spend your draft capital? Because, I've seen a lot of mocks that are mocking linemen to the Texans in the first round. And if you look at the interior of the offensive line, it makes perfect sense. I mean, Juice Scruggs as a guard is a disaster. Maybe he's a better center. I hope so. Does Kenyon Green come back? Do you want to put your eggs in the Kenyon Green basket at left guard? I certainly don't. So I don't know. So I don't know what the free agent guard or center class looks like, but I think if you can afford to add a center or a guard in free agency, because to me, you can add all the backs in the world. Behind this line, I don't know who's going to experience a whole lot of success.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough decision, but I'm with you. I think I'd rather get somebody who's experienced, has shown a little something at the NFL level on the offensive line if they're available. Again, it's all if they're available or not. But I mean, there's guys like Connor Williams is 26, 27 years old, coming out of Miami. He's going to be available this offseason. I don't know. We'll see if he's someone that the Texans look at. I don't know, but he plays guard. He plays a little bit of center. Um, we'll see. But you know, the way that everyone's talking, this is a destination now, right? This is a place that high level free agents are going to want to come play. And if you're an offensive lineman, CJ Stroud's a guy that you want to play for, you want to protect. So to me, that's why I think we'll be able to possibly do a little bit more in free agency with the receivers, with the linemen, and that opens up the draft to be able to, best pick available kind of things. When you look at just, top 30 player rankings, in that 25, 26, 27 ranking, there's, Xavier Worthy, Quinyon Mitchell is a cornerback, another cornerback, couple good wide receivers available. There's some safeties, which I do think we could look at safety. Um, Jalen Petrie, I think, he's not a good coverage guy at all. Really is not. I think he got hyped up
Yeah.
his rookie year because the defense was so bad. He made a crap ton of tackles because, again, as we mentioned, terrible run stopping. He's when Jimmy Ward is out, Jalen Petrie is a problem. When those two
Yeah.
play together, he's not as bad. You can kind of use him a little bit differently, but he is terrible in pass coverage. So if you could find a ball hawking safety, which the Texans have been looking for their entire freaking franchise existence. Thought they had one when they signed Ed Reed. Even then, he sucked, and so got to find somebody there would be a nice addition to the team.
Yeah. Daniel Manning just fell off his couch. Uh, but if he's listening to the podcast, if you are, Daniel,
I don't know if
thanks for joining.
Manny was a ball hawk here.
Daniel, thank you for joining the podcast. Thank you for listening.
Hey,
Um,
you're welcome to come on and tell me I'm an asshole. That's to my face. I'll welcome you on. I
no,
had, you know what? Glover Quinn ate in my restaurant one time. I sent him a free dessert.
you know, you're absolutely right about Petrie. And if you look at his Baylor career, he played a majority of his snaps at Baylor in the box. And so part of where, this defense, they ended up cutting Desmond King and ended up bringing him back. But Desmond King's another guy that you had in the box. And so then you had that, the kind of that question of, okay, which one of these guys do we play in the box? Can we, I don't know if we can play both of them in the box. So that kind of created some issues. Um, Steven Nelson is a free agent. I don't know how you feel about him. Um, Obviously, he had that pick six in the wild card game. And he, he had, a good amount of interceptions on the season. Him and Stingley both, created some, but then he also got burned. I mean, he was the primary cover guy against Amari Cooper the first Cleveland game. So, he's a guy that's probably going to be wanting 15 to 20 million a year. I don't know that I want to give him that. But to your point, you're mentioning some of the guys in the top 30. Do you want to look at a corner? Because then, you could put them across from Stingley. Both of them, if you could hit on a corner, you could have two covered corners on rookie deals, which, you can't, beat that with a stick. This team has about, I want to say, between 75 and $80 million to spend, but they've got some good players who are free agents on their own squad. Jonathan Grenard, do you want him back? If you do, that's probably 20 million. If you don't,
I don't want him back at 20. That's what's scary to me.
what,
He's had a
what?
lot of injuries, one really good year. Do we want to pay him if I could get him at 14, 15 a year on like a 4-year deal, I think I'd take it. But I want a rotation of pass rushers, Scott. I
But
want
then,
four guys that pin their ears back and go. And if we go all out on someone like Grenard, I don't want to be limited down the line. I want to be able to have 3, 4 defensive ends that we can sub out and just go, go, go.
I liked what Barnett brought late in the season.
Oh, he was
Uh,
great.
he had, I think 2.5 sacks in about 5 or 6 games. I'd love him as a part of a rotation, but he's not a starting defensive end. I think
No,
he's a guy.
pass rush only. I don't think he
Yeah.
stops the run well enough to
So
stay in full time.
so if you jettison Grenard, Jerry Hughes is probably retired, and if not, he should be retired. So who else are you putting in that opposite Grenard? That's kind of the question. And so could you draft another guy? Sure. But if you're drafting another guy in the first round, you're not drafting a corner, you're not drafting a receiver, you're not drafting a lineman. You only have that one first round pick. By the way, by virtue of beating Cleveland, you won the bet that we had way back when we were the old podcast. The Houston Texans will be picking before the Arizona Cardinals because of by virtue of beating the Cleveland Browns. Houston picks ends up being later. So that pick goes to Arizona. So great job, Nick Casario, for betting right on that one. I don't think anybody at the time thought you were in your right mind. But hey, good job. But that's the problem with and I say only 75 or 80 million is that you've got a stable of guys like Steven Nelson, Jonathan Grenard are good football players, not great football players. They're good football players. Do you want them back? Are you willing to pay a premium for that? If not, who are you replacing a good football player with? That's kind of the dilemma that we go into the offseason.
Chase Young is going to be a free agent that's offseason. What if you replaced Jonathan Grenard with Chase Young? It's going to be
I'd
more money, but you're pairing Chase Young and Will Anderson on each side of the football. If you're
I'd,
going to
I'd
spend, let's go get them.
yeah, I'd be good with that. But then again, obviously what that means is you're not spending in other areas.
I don't
So,
think Steven Nelson is going to be expensive as you think. He's 31 years old. Spot Track has him. His 2023 average was like 4.5 million. I think is what his contract was worth.
well, so let's say he's
Um,
10 million. You know, okay, I
I
might
don't
do
know.
that.
Dory Jackson's out there as a free agent. Um,
I mean,
I don't know. Kendall
uh, uh,
Fuller's available.
so let's look at, a few years ago, we signed Bradley Roby to an extension, and I think it was like 9 million. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think he's on what Bradley Roby's level was back then?
No, I think Bradley Roby was better.
So, well, yeah. Um,
Bradley
so
Roby was the number one shutdown corner on our team at that time.
if
That's
you
what we
could,
expected him to be,
if you can, well, I don't think obviously he was. I mean, he
but
was
that's
the
what we
best.
expected of him.
Yeah, he was the best corner we had. I don't think that makes him a number one
I mean, we
corner.
made that move
That
expecting him to come in and be like a number one shutdown corner. I don't know if he lived up to that. I mean, he definitely didn't live up to that, but we made that move expecting him to be that guy.
Yeah, and so the question is that can you find like so let's say 10 if you want to budget 10 million for a corner. Can you find a better corner for 10 million than Steven Nelson on the market?
I think so.
And if you can, I say go ahead and do it. I say let's go ahead and upgrade because the whole thing is that this team got torched in the passing game. And we got torched in the passing game partially because we sold out against the run, which we can upgrade probably on the interior and defensive tackles because I like Sheldon Rankins. I like Malik Collins. I don't love either one. And particularly, I don't love either one against the run. I think they're better pass rushers than they are run stoppers. I mean, if you put a DJ Reader on this defensive line, watch out. I mean, that would change the whole complexion of this defense.
Yeah, that's the one that got away, huh? DJ
Yeah.
Reader. I think you're right on. Actually, Spot Track has you right on at 10 million for Nelson next year. They've got him at 10.2. They've got him as the 18th ranked cornerback um, available. So we'll see what happens there, Scott. But it definitely have an off season to find a way to make this team championship caliber. I think there's a lot of, as we've mentioned, a lot of great pieces in place, and it's time to make those moves. But speaking of making moves, last week we were on this podcast and we talked about could possibly Kendall Graveman's injury be a blessing in disguise. I think it was me who said this could force Dana Brown to go out and spend now. And I think it was the very next day, if not 2 days later, that they announced Hader to the Astros. And
Yeah.
so, in the words of one of my new favorite artists, well, new to me, Taylor Swift, the hater's gonna hate, hate, hate.
Okay. So, did you catch
I'm a
the?
Swiftie now, Scott. I'm
Yeah.
in.
Actually, I was that before because Ann actually bought the 1989 album back
Oh,
when it
it's a
came
great
out.
album. Great album.
So we listened to that on the way from Baton Rouge to Houston. So thank God. Anyway, all right. Did you listen? Did you watch the introductory press conference?
I haven't yet. No.
So one of the things Dana Brown said is that, and it's amazing. So he's a great poker player because he came out and said when Graveman got injured, "This has not forced me to do anything." He came out in the press conference, said like immediately he's calling the agent on the phone. We need to get something done now, and that thing came together in 72 hours. So the hope I have for this team moving forward, and he actually came out today and said he's looking for a left-handed outfield bat who with speed. So looking at the financial numbers, so not to bog anybody down, but the estimate is we're currently 8 million over the initial tax threshold, which is a 20% penalty. So if you're 8 million over 20%, it's a little under $2 million. That's not bad. Um, the next threshold is at 20 million over, and I don't know if we see.
It goes to 12% there.
Yeah, I don't know if we see Jim Crane going more than that. So you
See,
got
that's
12.
where a couple people disagree with you. They think this is the sign where they go ahead and get the extensions done. They think, well, they're already over, so we might as long as you stay below 40, as long as you stay
Yeah,
below 40 over, that's when it really starts to get bad.
I'm just saying there. I say anybody that thinks we're going to go out and get Jordan Montgomery or Cody Bellinger, that's
No.
probably not in the cards. However, there are some guys who have been mentioned who are, I wouldn't say not starter quality, but would be good competition for Jake Myers. And I think that Dana Brown has played this absolutely correct. I think he's gone and said Jake Myers is our starting center fielder because the last thing you want to do is you want to sit there and go, we got to get a center fielder. Oh my God. And then you don't get one. You have to go back and crawl back to Jake Myers. Say like, well, I guess you're our guy. Um, you want to show confidence in him, but you want to work behind the scenes to get somebody that's better. And there's some guys I've heard mention. Travis Janikowski is a name that I've heard. Um, Michael A. Taylor is a guy that's played some center field that's available. Um, Tommy Pham is really not a center fielder anymore, but he's a guy I like who could play left if you want to
Also,
move.
not a left-handed hitter, but I do like
No,
Fam a lot.
no, but I think to me the problem that you have to do now is you have to look at this team and you have to look at it multidimensionally and say like, okay, who's a guy? Because you have the advantage you have is you have Chas McCormick who can play both left and center well. So you don't have to get a center fielder. You can absolutely get a left fielder and move Chas back to center. Or you could get a guy who could be like a fourth outfielder type who, if Jake Meyer sucks, that you feel okay in an outfield configuration that has that guy in it somewhere, whether it's center or left. Another
Aaron
guy that,
Hicks is a guy that's been mentioned
yeah,
that kind of fits into that configuration a little bit.
he does. Another guy that I've heard mentioned, but he doesn't fit into center field. It'd be Eddie Rosario is another guy. And really, when you look at a guy like that, what you're looking at is somebody who's going to come in under that 12 million magic number that
Hmm.
keeps you under that 20 million threshold, but could at least play a passable, at the very worst, left field and allow Chaz to move back to center field if Jake Myers sucks. Because you also got some young kids that are coming up too. That you had, I can't remember that. Was it Melton that came up last spring and looked really good, or
Yeah.
was that Durden? Or was that Durden?
Melton came up in the spring. Durden, I think it was 2 years ago in the spring. And you still have the guy from Brook,
Corey Jolks.
Corey Jolks too.
Yeah,
Who he got a taste of some seasoning last year. Who I don't have high hopes for, but maybe he goes and spent this whole offseason saying, "Hey, this is what I sucked at last year. I'm coming back ready to
and
compete," and we've seen that happen before. So I'm not counting him completely out, but I am not necessarily counting on Joel to come in and mash, but there is an outside chance that this guy's got a good taste of major league action, realized what he wasn't good enough at, and went and worked his tail off. So we'll see.
Yeah, you have Pedro Leon, who's an awfully toolsy player, a whole lot of swing and miss in that game. I mean, his numbers in the minor leagues can be scary when you're looking at the strikeout numbers, but he's a guy that's also played some short. So he's a guy that, you stick him on this team and you've got some exciting mix and match possibilities if those tools come out in the spring. What you don't want to do is you don't want to sit there and say, Pedro Leon or Melton or Durden, they're our guy, because they might come in spring and they might suck. But you want a guy that's good enough to hold down the position, but you also is not expensive enough to where you don't feel like you can sit there and say, you know what, we really don't need you. We got this young kid who's better.
I'm trying to see. I wonder if Jock Peterson signed yet.
No, he hasn't. He
That might
hasn't,
be
but
he's got some speed. He's got some pop. He can play left field, and you can move Chaz to center. He is a left-handed hitter. I don't know clubhouse wise how he'd fit in, but I think he might be someone that would be worth taking a look at.
what I would do with him, and I would do the same thing with guys like Soler, is I don't think you're going to see the Astros sign a guy in January. I think you're going to see they're going to wait for that calendar to flip to February, and they're going to see whose market drops. Because right now, Jock Peterson's not a $12 million player. Jock Peterson's
No,
probably a $15 million player. But if he's
I'd give
sitting
him
there,
4 or 5 to be a bench outfielder.
but if he, but that's if he's an everyday player. If there's no everyday job for him, then yeah, suddenly that market just tanks, and he can be a starting left fielder for you. And he's played some center. So yeah, he's
He
a
came
guy
up
that,
as a center fielder, but I
yeah,
don't want him to start. I don't want him to start.
no, no, no.
I'll give a platoon of him, Chaz, Jordan, and
But he's
um
even last year he was like an 800 OPS guy. I mean, that's,
764, and that's with
okay.
a 235 average. He was 850. He was 874 in 2022 with
But that's in
23 bombs.
San Francisco, which is a horrible
Tough
hitter's park.
ballpark too.
It's a
Yeah.
horrible hitter's park. I think he's an 800 OPS guy in Houston. So you tell me who's better right now. I mean, Chas McCormick, but with Chas McCormick's in the lineup regardless. So, I don't think Jake Myers is putting that up. So
If I could get him for, I'd go 7 or 8 to be a platoon guy in left field, knowing that I want to DH Jordan a
sure,
good 50% of his games, and I've got
if
Jake
not more,
Myers potentially in. Huh?
if not more, I would DH
Yeah,
Jordan almost exclusively, just
yeah.
so
So
I
if
can have
I'm
his bat in the lineup.
if I want to have a legitimate backup plan of Jake Myers not being the guy, I've got someone who I can play every day in left field who's going to give me at worst, maybe a Colby Rasmus type season where he's going to hit 15 to 20 homers, strike out a fair amount, and hit 240, 250, and let's
Sure,
call it a game.
sure, and
Not
and
everybody's going to hit 300.
no, 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 and Soler is kind of a similar. I don't know. I think it's similar money, but I think it's similar case. If he's sitting around there in early to mid February and he hasn't signed, go ahead and make a run on me. He probably wouldn't come for 6 or 7 million, but maybe he comes for 10. And I'd pay
Yeah.
him that. And sit there and say, okay, Jordan, can you give us 50 games in left field? You know, I think he could
I think he'd
probably do
want to
it.
give you more. I think
Yeah,
Jordan likes playing the
he'd
field.
oh yeah, I think he'd definitely want to give you more, but to me, I want him playing 150 games. I want him in the lineup 150 times. However that happens. That happens probably more likely at DH. Because Jordan, if you look at, his rate stats and his, per game or per, however many, we look at per 162 in baseball reference, it's crazy. He just can't seem to stay on the field. So to me, Jock Peterson, I think would be ideal in that kind of role if you could get him at that price, which right now he's a starting outfielder. I don't know if you saw Joey Gallo signed today for $5 million.
Yeah, that's what made me think if we could get Jock for maybe 7, I think he's better than Joey, but not $8 million better.
Yeah, I mean, and Joey Gallo's a guy. I think he. What's funny about him is I kind of put him in that Sonny Gray and Frankie Montas box of guys that the Yankees acquired that absolutely fucking sucked as Yankees.
What about
And
was Jeff Weaver?
yeah, guys who just absolutely tanked. Jack McDowell back in the day, so they called him the Yankee Flipper because he flipped off, the fans at Yankee Stadium. And Sonny Gray, look what happened to him. He leaves the Yankees, and suddenly he's Sonny Gray again. Well, he's Sonny Gray in Cincinnati, he's Sonny Gray in Minnesota. Now he's going to the Cardinals. I think Gallo's going to he ended up putting up decent numbers for a while for Joey Gallo in Minnesota last year. Low batting average. I mean, he's a guy that's going to hit right around the Mendoza line, but he's a guy that's going to walk a ton. He's going to hit with power. So, Jock Peterson is basically Joey Gallo, except he'll hit 230, 240 instead of 200.
He didn't
But,
even get that last year, man. He was a buck
oh,
77
yeah.
last year, but
But
he
he
did
was,
have 21
yeah.
homers.
Well, yeah. And he was, he kind of tapered off late in the season. Like he got hurt, I want to say in May. And then after that, things just didn't go well for him. But if you look at, say, a Jock Peterson, you stick a guy out in left, where's he hitting in this lineup? Even if he's an everyday player.
7th, 8th.
Ask me if I give a shit if my 7th or 8th hitter is hitting 230. If he's
Right.
got pop and can get on base. I mean, really, in that lineup, Jeremy Pena becomes what, your 9th hitter?
Which I like, yeah.
I mean, and he's got some speed. He's getting better at getting on base. So, I mean, we talked about, 2017 in the past about how if you looked at that lineup, there were no easy outs in that lineup. And that's really what you need to move towards. That's what the Rangers had last year, is there were not any easy outs in that lineup. I think there were a lot of guys that were playing above their heads. And I think that's of course they lost Mitch Garver. They've lost a ton of arms. But if you look at the Rangers lineup, tell me who in that lineup's an easy out from last
Yeah,
season.
no. I think Tavares was the one guy you could maybe take a little breather on, but even he had some great pop too. So that's what it takes is you've got to have an unrelenting lineup, right? You don't have to have a bunch of guys who hit a ton of homers, but you've got to make a pitcher grind for 9 different at bats, and you can't ever let him go. Whew, Martin Maldonado, I can take a breather. Or, whew, Brad Osmus, okay. Don't have to worry about this one as much. Like, no, if you've got to sit there and you've got to bring it for 9 different hitters, which, depending on how the season plays out for the Astros, that's a real possibility now, right? Because you're taking out Maldonado and you're putting in Yainer Diaz. Okay, that's a legitimate hitter in that position now. So, depending on what happens with Jake Myers and if he we all forget he was coming off a pretty bad shoulder injury, so maybe it just took him a little bit of time to get back to it. And who knows, he could come out and seize the
Yeah,
opportunity and have a great year. I
yeah,
don't want to discount what he can do because he's another guy, Scott, that's toolsy, right? Like he plays a
yeah.
great center field. He's fast. He is a good to great base runner. If he could just hit 265 with 15 homers, I'd be ecstatic. If he could just give me the batting average and 10 to 15 homers, not even batting average, give me an on base percentage above 350 between walks
Oh
and
shit.
hits and whatever.
um, but that's where when you're talking about signing a guy for 6 or 7 million, the freedom that gives you, particularly if it's a 1-year deal, is if Jake Myers turns out to be the shit, you can tell that guy, well, you're on our bench. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't
And you
really
can
need
either
you that.
trade him for some prospects somewhere down the line. You can, or you know what, you have a great late inning bat, right?
Or
Like if you get one good swing a game, Jock, get up there and go take it.
you have a guy that can give a guy a breather, because I think he can play right field as well. Kyle Tucker needs a day off. Hey, hey Jock, go out there and play right field one day. And that's a great guy to have. I think And in terms of the signing that we just did, what makes me excited about Josh Hader is the possibilities, and I think it is with Espada as your manager, those two together make me excited. Because if this were a Dusty Baker managed team, I'd be like, oh shit, okay, we got Hader in the ninth, we've got Presley in the eighth, we've got Abreu in the seventh. Here we go. Yay. But with Espada as a guy who's willing to listen, this gives you the possibility to use Ryan Presley in some very creative ways. Number one, Hader in the past has been a guy that doesn't like pitching more than 2 days in a row. He definitely is not going to pitch more than 3 days in a row. He's a guy that doesn't like pitching more than an inning. Now, in the press conference, when you watch it, he was very good about how he answered that question. Basically, he answered hey, whatever the ball club needs, I'm going to do. But I think behind the scenes, there's definitely going to be some, we don't want to pitch this guy. So let's say, you have a tough series against the Rangers. Josh Hader has closed out the first 2 games in tight games. You have a 4-3 lead, third game of the series. Do you feel comfortable throwing out Ryan Presley to close out the ninth inning?
Or
Absolutely.
Brian Abreu.
Yeah, absolutely. But the other thing I would use Presley with is we mentioned this where it was Maton's role or Maton.
He's your fireman. He's putting
He's
shit out.
yeah, he's the guy that, in the 6th inning, it's a 4-1 game, you have the lead and you have bases loaded. Oh shit, what are we going to do? Here comes Ryan Presley. Because Ryan Presley, one thing he will not do is walk people. And so if you come in with a guy with runners on base, he's not going to walk in, another run. Now, we've seen him get hit. We've seen him get hit with 2 strikes, particularly in the ninth inning. And so, all these people who talking about the fact, oh, we had a great closer. I don't know if Ryan Presley is a great closer, but he is a damn good relief pitcher. And that goes back to the whole Wagner conversation is I want guys who are going to pitch in the highest leverage situations who are going to nail it down. I don't give a shit when the ball game that is. I honestly don't. Because a lot of times when you have you have like a 5-2 lead in the ninth inning and you're going up against hitters 7, 8, 9, do I need a $20 million guy to get me a save in that situation? God, I hope not. I would hope that everybody in your fucking pen could come in and get 3 outs against the 7, 8, and 9 hitter. However, when you got bases loaded and a 1-run lead, oh shit, we saw Ryan Plessy knock that down in Game 5 of the ALCS. We saw him have to come in and put out Brian Abreu's fire, and he did it. So I have full confidence that he could fulfill that role next year.
Yeah, since coming to Houston, Ryan Presley in 283 games has finished 175 of them. He's got 107 saves. He's pitched to a 2.67 ERA in what many people would call a hitter's ballpark. He's filled multiple roles too, right? When he got here, he was the setup guy to Roberto Osuna. He was excellent in that role his first season in Houston as a setup guy when he got here. He pitched to a .77 ERA in 26 appearances. So I don't think there's going to be a problem. Ryan Presley is not a guy who's closer or bust, right? I think we've got a bullpen of guys who just want to win another World Series. I think when you've tasted that, all you want to do is get back. When you've tasted that level of success, and and you're Ryan Presley, this is the last year with this team. I'll do what I got to do, man. We got to have somebody who gets big outs in big parts of the game, whether it's the ninth inning, as you said, the 6th inning, 7th, 8th, whatever it is. I trust Ryan Presley to go out there and get outs. It may not always be pretty. It may require Chaz flying into a wall, making a game-saving catch. But hey, he got the out, and as you said, he doesn't walk people. In his entire time in Houston, he's only walked 64 batters. Okay, he's pitched 276 innings and he's walked 64 batters. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
That's
He's only
less than
given up 25 homers in his time in Houston. I mean, it's the numbers that he's got as a reliever in Houston. It's fantastic because he was good in Minnesota, right? He had Still the same, pretty decent control. 108 walks across 281 innings. He gave up. He gave up 31 homers across 281 innings. But I mean, he's pitched in higher leverage spots here in Houston. He's risen to the occasion, and there's just no reason in my mind to believe that he would have any issue pitching in a tight game in the seventh in the playoffs versus the ninth. And I think he would acknowledge whatever's best for the team. Haters acknowledge what's best for the team. Real quick, I didn't watch the whole press conference, but what I did see was a clip of Hader where he said, I'm going to give it my all on the field and in the community. And I do think that's the one thing I wanted to just take a little tip of the cap. That's something we do on this show. Love the attitude, because I think Houston, as you know, as I know, as our listeners know, we love athletes that embrace the city. We will embrace you too. And those that go out and start a foundation or do things to make the city better are here to help. A la, JJ Watt. I think no one was embraced faster or quicker than JJ Watt, because he got into the city immediately and just started doing good deeds, right? He just was like, what good can I do? And next thing you know, we love this guy. Then somewhere down the line, hurricane happens and he does what he does. But we already knew who he was before then. Love the attitude the Hater has. Look forward to seeing him, become a Houstonian. We are Transplant City, and we welcome everybody. So look forward to seeing him go buy his first pair of rodeo boots and, look like everybody else at the rodeo who only wears their, I call them rodeo boots because you only wear them, once a year at the Houston Rodeo. Then they go back in the back of the closet till next year.
So, kind of transitioning, I wanted to do kind of a hybrid here with our, favorite segment of the week. My tip of the cap goes to Ryan Presley. Because number one, you mentioned the numbers. He's been an absolutely dynamite relief pitcher. He was traded here in 2018, I believe. I think he was a part of that, deadline deal, from Jeff Luhnow. Um,
2018, yes.
so number one, and consider the source here. My uncle is a guy that considers himself to be plugged into these kind of things. And he said that Ryan Presley is universally regarded as the most loved member of the clubhouse by the rest of the players. I'm not going to go into who the most hated guy is, because that's not really what this is about. But he's a guy that, and I don't know if
Was
you
it
cut.
Dusty? No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
no,
I'm just kidding.
no, it was a player. It was a player. And I'll just leave it at that. Um, I don't know if you caught this part of the press conference, but they asked, Hader about Presley's reaction. And Presley's reaction was basically, let's go. And let's look at what Ryan Presley is looking at here. He is in the last fully guaranteed season of his deal. He's making $14 million this year. I think there's a mutual club option, but I think that we'll probably both agree that he's probably looking for work elsewhere. We talked
I
earlier,
don't know. I
but
really don't know
maybe,
about that.
maybe,
I
but
think there's a chance they both say, hey, let's do it again. We'll see. I mean, we still have to play this year out, but I wouldn't rule out him being here one more year.
but the thing is that we're going to look at the fact that closers get the most money, and he's going to spend the majority of 2024 as not the closer. So he is, I would definitely say, I think you would agree with this, a top 20 closer in Major League Baseball. You think he'd easily go there? I mean, that's pretty safe.
I'd say so.
But he's not going to be a closer next year. Josh Hader is going to be the closer. So this is a guy who not only is saying, well, I guess, but he's excited because he knows what this means. And this means the possibility of for him getting a second ring and for Houston getting a third ring. And so
Yeah,
that's
this
what he's looking
season
at.
has a bit of a last dance feel to it. With Bregman at the end of his contract, Verlander technically at the end of his contract, although there's a good chance his vests for next year as well. Altuve's coming up, Tucker's coming up. As you mentioned, Presley has that mutual option, but technically the end of his contract has a last dance feel to it. So to have one more real good shot at it, if I'm Ryan Presley, I'm saying hell yeah, let's
But
go.
But
There's also Ryan Presley's 35 years old right now.
yeah, exactly. And
There's a good chance that the option that he decides next year is retirement, right? That's also not out of the line of questioning. At 36 years old with a ton of major league innings, you might just say, "I've had a great career. I'm gonna go back home to Flower Mound, or maybe I'll stay in Houston. I don't know where he decides to live, but either way, maybe I'm just done." Like, and I tip my cap to you if that's the case. But if this is his last ride, obviously he wants to go out a winner.
I think he wants one more probably big contract, and that would be the one reason why he would deny the option. But I'll just say, just in general, to expand it out, his mother was one of the most, refreshing follows on X, and I'm no longer on X, and that's one of the few things I miss about X. And she was, she just loves her son,
Yeah, she's
and
great.
and she's a huge fan, and she took on all the criticisms of her son. She didn't hide behind it. She didn't act like a spoiled brat. How dare you? But she took it on, and so that whole family, Ryan Presley, I will forever remember what you did in the 2022 World Series run. You were
Yeah,
absolutely perfect. And so
he was phenomenal.
no matter in that entire bullpen, in fact, no matter what happens with any of their careers, we will always have the memories of that World Series run where that bullpen surrendered nothing in 3 rounds of playoffs. And that's just completely unheard of.
It really was special. Well, Scott, it is getting to be that time of the show, the ones where all our fans are waiting for. They know something bugged you this week. They know something just didn't sit right with the big S. Scott, who's your scumbag of the week?
Oh, I think, I think overall I am going to go with, I don't even know what to call them. I'm just going to say, because you have, Swifties, so are you going to call them anti-Swifties?
Oh, yeah.
I,
Losers.
I, okay, Taylor Swift music is not necessarily my brand of music. I recognize that she is immensely talented, but not the kind of music that I'm typically into. But to give her a hard time for showing up to a football game to support her boyfriend, what are we doing? Is it her choice that the cameras choose to go to her? No, she doesn't even know when the cameras are on her. The reactions that you see her make, when her boyfriend is scoring 2 touchdowns in the divisional playoff round, those are her genuine reactions. She's not masking for a camera. She's just, she's there in the moment. So I don't understand, people that hate on her. Yeah, is she overexposed? Sure. Um, but that's not completely her choice. And obviously she's going to have to, and she and Travis are going to have to deal with that. If that relationship evolves, and that's fine. But to be completely against her and all this, that, and the other. Yeah, there's legitimate criticism there of the coverage. Okay. Do we need to cover her and show her 15, 20, 30 times a game? No, absolutely not. But that's not on her. You can't ask her to stay away or to, go to a very special private box where you can't see into the window and she can't see out and she has to watch the game on television. I mean, that's stupid. Let her watch the game. Let her enjoy the game. Let her enjoy her boyfriend playing well. Who, we mentioned Ryan Presley being at the end of his career. Travis Kelsey might be nearing the end too. We saw his brother Jason Kelsey just retire. So Travis Kelsey can't be too far behind. So if she wants to enjoy her boyfriend playing football, if she wants to root him on, if she wants to bring friends to the game, if she wants to do this, all that, and the other, let her. Um, it's not her fault that the networks want to milk her for everything that she's worth. That's not on her. What is on her is, just being there, supporting her boyfriend, and being cognizant, of the coverage, but she can't afford to change her life around everything that is. Now, so just to keep in mind, so for Tim, because I don't know that he did his tip of the cap. So remember, Ryan Presley and his mom are my tip of the cap, and then the anti-Swifties were my scumbags. So
Yeah, I'm on board with you on the anti Swifties. I'm a pro Swifty. I'm a pro Swifty. I could consider myself a Swifty. I'm a Swift dad. Jam a lot of T Swift. Some by choice, some by request. But yeah, I get my tip of the cap was to Hader. I enjoyed his introductory press conference. But I'm gonna stay in the same realm as you for my scumbag, Scott. I'm gonna go with the NFL. As I'm sure you watched the game on Sunday, the Chiefs and the Bills. Fake punt. Chiefs get the ball deep in the Bills' territory. McCole Hardman dives for the end zone. Ball pops out. Touchback. Okay, cool. Well, what comes out on Monday is that the NFL is considering changing the rule so that's no longer a touchback. Why? That has been the rule forever. That is a turnover, my friend. You fumbled it, it went through the end zone. The reason they're considering it is because the Chiefs almost lost that game that way. If the Chiefs would have lost, it would have been like, oh, that's done for sure. I mean, the way that the NFL is willing to bend and, you know, change things just to ramp up points is ridiculous. That was a good defensive stand, in my opinion. Guy came through, punched the ball out. Defense got the ball back for their offense. So to come out the next day and say, you know what, thinking about changing that rule,
okay,
that's why you're my scumbag of the week.
okay. Number one, that is absolutely a brain dead stupid rule, and it always has been. Let me ask you this: I fumbled the ball out of bounds. Who gets the ball?
The team that fumbled it gets it back
So why is the end zone any different?
because there's always been a rule the ball goes through the end zone. It's a
Because
safety on the other end.
but nobody possessed it. So the
But
whole
if you fumbled it on your own goal line and it bounced into the end zone and rolled out of bounds, it's a safety.
yeah,
There's an action point in the end zone.
yeah. I think if you want to move, so here's where I'm going to agree with you. So think back when the overtime rule changed. Do you know when where both teams could possess it unless one
It
scored a
was after
touchdown?
Favre. It was after Favre lost in
Yes,
overtime.
yes. That's the part that I think is detestable because basically what you're saying is we wanted Favre in the Super Bowl. It's not fair. We need to change the rule. You ought to evaluate rules based on whether or not they make sense or not. To me, that rule doesn't make sense. I think it should go back to the team that fumbled the ball at the spot where they fumbled it. That's what and I think that should have always been the rule. I'm not going to change it just because the Chiefs might have lost. But I would go. There's a lot of rules that I would change that I think are stupid. Number one, I could give a fuck if all 11 people are in motion. As long as they're not in motion when the snap is hit, why are we calling illegal motion? Bull fucking shit. Let all 11 of them run around the field, do whatever the fuck they want before the clock strikes zero. As long as they're not crossing the line of scrimmage, I don't care. I mean, there's all these rules. Like when they did all of a sudden we're going to start emphasizing offensive offsides. Why? Why are we all of a sudden emphasizing that? Now, the Chiefs bitched, moaned, and complained when their guy was clearly offsides. But the point that they had was, why are we emphasizing this now? So to me, make rule changes at the end of the year. Look at what makes sense or what doesn't make sense. I mean, we looked at the fact that who was it that game, the Texans game where we lost because there were so many bad calls. Like one of them was like a Tank Dell catch down the field that got called back from
It
a
was a
penalty.
Jags game.
Yeah, and so
The second Jags game.
and a lot of that was penalties where you're like, who the fuck cares? Because they're talking about the motion rule. I don't give a shit if there are two guys in motion at the same time. Defense, fucking deal with it. They shouldn't be in motion when the ball snapped, But, you know, I don't know. I think what the NFL needs to do is the NFL needs to get together with their officials. They need to get together and, number one, look at the rule book. Which one of these rules are stupid? And just we need to throw those out. And number two, we need these officials to be full-time employees. You need to be sitting there. You need to be looking at game film. We need to be looking at, instead of you going back and coaching fucking boys basketball in Oklahoma during the week, we need you looking at game film. We need to sit there and say, you know what? You blew that call. That should have been pass interference. Do better next time. We need that for the NFL, and there are just too many instances where there were just horrible, horrible calls just throughout the season. So that's my 2 cents.
No, you're not wrong. It's the reactionary stuff that makes us doubt the NFL at times. Where I think you're right. If they came out and said this is a bad rule, here's why, we'd agree with them a lot more. But when you see a tight play in a game go one way, and then the next day they're like, "We're going to discuss changing this rule," it just leads us to doubt you and question the ulterior motives at the end of the day. And as fans, I think we'd like, as you're saying, full time officials, transparency. Give us all that, because we've talked about it before. Other leagues do it. The NBA gives you the final 4-minute report or whatever it is, where they say, hey, here's the missed calls, here's how it may have affected the end of the game, will be better. And they hold those refs accountable. Is it perfect? No. But at least, there's that transparency there that says, hey, we acknowledge this guy sucked today. And it takes a lot for the NFL to say this guy sucked. It normally takes more than one game in a row for us to finally hear something of like, oh, wow, this guy might be in trouble.
Yeah,
So,
like the
well,
Lions crew. Yeah, the crew in the Lions Dallas Cowboys game. I think that crew was actually punished somehow.
yeah.
They didn't say what the punishment was.
Same with Major League Baseball too, right? Where there's just no transparency from the league office on any kind of grading of the umpires that they do, any kind of disciplinary for bad things other than just playoff selection, right? We saw who got playoff picks, and apparently that's the best umpires. But who knows, Scott? But that's all we've got here for you today. It's been another great week. We appreciate everybody who joined us. Hopefully next week, we're back with, I don't know, something exciting, something new, good news to talk about. As it's maybe been a little bit of a somber episode here with Wagner not getting in, and the Texans losing. But hey, we got Hater, and as I said earlier, the hater's gonna hate, and it's gonna be a great 2024 Houston Astros season. We're looking forward to it. But now, Scott, it's Rockets season, and so we'll get a lot more Rockets talk going forward, and a little bit more off-season Texans and Astros news.
Absolutely. I want to thank all the listeners for checking us out here in our third episode. And go ahead, feel free to interact with us on the Facebook page, and now you can watch if you're on Apple Podcast, so you can watch and listen at the same time. So feel free. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I'm kind of showing my camera at my jersey. This is the Minneapolis Millers. So the colors of orange and black. So guess whose minor league jersey this was. And if you guess right, we'll mention your name in the next episode. So, give us a ring on Facebook.
All right, but that's going to be all that we have for everyone. That we appreciate those who joined us, and we look forward to continuing to see you week in and week out here on Born on the Bayou Sports. We'll see you next time.